The video you've all been impatiently waiting for. Rook Exodus Part 4. Now when I tell you this story is special, I mean this story is special. And if you guys do your part by liking and commenting on this video, Rook Exodus actually has the possibility of coming to life. I mean, just imagine a big budget Rook Exodus movie or a series on Amazon Prime. But with that being said, kick your feet up, grab some popcorn, and let's get into it. So the last issue ended off with Rook and Direwolf establishing contact with all the other amazing looking wardens until realizing that Ersa was about to pay them a visit and ride outside the oasis, accompanied by Warhog and also the warden of the Python's Ka. And this issue picks up right where it left off, with Rook and Donica preparing for battle and establishing connection to their animals. In the midst of doing so, Rook addresses his personal battle with the crows, saying that they constantly push against his commands and often break his helmet's connection to them by combining their minds together. They weren't his friends and displayed no signs of loyalty towards him, making it extremely hard to command them to fight. After that, he began to stress his lack of faith in planet Exodus. With the world engine offline, it's been reverting to the barren planet it was before Better World dressed it up. Donica, her father, and some of the other wardens believed it could be saved if they found and fixed the world engine, but he knew that it wasn't that simple because nature wasn't the only thing killing Exodus. Its people were too. Exactly what had happened on Earth was happening here now, and as Ersa remarked that his mission would soon be completed, Direwolf and Rook commanded the wolves and crows to start heading their way as quickly as possible. While running through the woods trying to make contact with the threat, Rook and Donica reached out to Karpus, asking him how much time was needed for evac because as Ersa was closing in on them, Karpus was focused on getting the children to safety, using his army of turtles to take them downstream, but stating that the rest of his forces were staying to fight for the oasis and to protect the wildlife grid. Rook was confused as to why the grid was even a concern right now, but according to Donica, it was probably the most important thing of all because Ersa would be able to locate every warden on Exodus if he managed to get his hands on it. Moments later, Rook was sent flying through a tree and onto the ground, urging Donica to tell her wolves to hurry because they just encountered their first threat. And as Rook got back up on his feet, he gazed upon the man who was wearing his friend's helmet, expressing that he made a promise to himself to bring Swine's name to justice before abandoning Exodus. Fueled by nothing more than a burning desire for revenge, he was determined to recover Swine's helmet, free his animals, and kill the man impersonating him. But after commanding his crows to swarm him, Warhog easily scared the birds away by unloading a round into the air, and then he demanded his newly acquired army to trample him. So Donica tried telling Rook to get to high ground, only to be interrupted just moments later by an immensely enormous and terrifying looking python bursting out from underneath her. Despite being overcome by fear, she then informed Rook that this was surely a distraction coordinated by Ersa, and unsurprisingly she was right, because on the next page, while securing the wildlife grid, Karpus and his men were put to a stop when something began banging its way inside. Wondering if it was Rook or Direwolf, Karpus then called their names, but the chances of it being them were non-existent as Rook was in the middle of being hurled into a tree by the army of hogs, and Donica was still freshly in her battle with the monstrous python. What happened next was truly a thing of nightmares, as the door came crashing down to the floor, compromised by none other than Ersa, the most merciless villain of all, stating that the turtles were slow just like Karpus. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Donica was finally confronted by Ka, commander of pythons, who was definitely having fun with this since she actually used to be one of Donica's students back in training, a student that Donica expelled, and as she instructed her python to continue pressing the fight, Donica was left with no other choice but to leap on top of it and end its mindless rampage by stabbing her electrically charged staff into it. And shortly after that, she'd give Ka the same treatment, knocking her onto the ground while emphasizing that she didn't expel her because of bad behavior. She expelled her because of her susceptibility to instinct influence. The snakes slithered their way inside her head and changed her into a cold-hearted predator. Meanwhile, Rook struggled to keep his chance of getting revenge alive after being ruthlessly battered onto the ground by Warhog and his mace, who stated that Swine died like a pig and so would he because his dumb birds weren't going to save him. But the thing is that Rook wasn't actually counting on the birds to save him. He was counting on Donica's wolf pack to save him, storming onto the battlefield, immediately pouncing on top of Warhog and ripping chunks of his flesh out. After that, Rook was able to free the leader of Swine's pigs, Pumbaa, from his chains, and then he secured Swine's helmet just like he said he would. Pumbaa was very grateful for being freed because Warhog treated him and the drift like trash. crash. But moments later, Rook was put back on edge when Donika's wolf pack started growling at him and the pigs. Apparently, Donika's helmet was experiencing some sort of interference, most likely due to Ersa retrieving the wildlife grid. Thankfully, while Rook stated that he wouldn't let her wolves hurt Pumbaa, Donika's helmet went back online and the wolves were tamed. After regrouping, our two protagonists began navigating back towards the oasis because Karpus wasn't responding. When asking Donika what happened to the snake lady, she responded that she retreated. Nevertheless, she sensed that something was very wrong, so they started heading towards Karpus even faster, only to discover that him and his men were overpowered by Ersa and his bears. Because he had the grid though, their only option was leaping into action, with Donika taking initiative alongside her wolves, who ganged up on the bears without hesitation. Making his move just moments later was none other than Rook, forcing his crows to overwhelm Ersa despite their lack of desire for fighting. But after Ersa got his hands on Wolf Mommy, he viciously hurled her body into Rook's, causing him to crash onto the ground and knocking his helmet off. Now that his crows were free from his control, they fled the scene without a single ounce of remorse, leaving him defenseless as Ersa wrapped his hand around his neck, dangling his body in the air while telling him he was weak just like his birds. And in a moment's notice, Rook was hurled off the dam and sent plummeting to what was possibly his death as Donika screamed his name. And sadly, that is where this issue comes to an end, but I'm actually never gonna cover Rook again and leave you guys wondering what happened to him for the rest of your lives.